goats. Hi friends, my name is Julie and welcome back to my farm. In this video, I'm going to help you decide whether sheep or goats would be the right animal for your farm or homestead. Now, most people don't even know that there's a difference between sheep or goats. They may think that goats are just a horned version of a sheep, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. They're actually very different. Now, while they're both ruminants, which means they have a 4-chamber digestive system, including a rumen that helps them to ferment and digest grass and other forage, each species is more specialized to eat different types of forage. Sheep are known as grazers, and that means they're more suited to eat grass off the ground, whereas goats are known as browsers, which means they're more suited to eat taller weeds or leafy greens that are more at eye level. They actually have very different anatomy of the muscles in their neck, where it takes much less effort for a sheep to have its nose to the ground than it does for a goat, who is more suited to have their head up high. And while both sheep and goats can subsist on pretty much the same sort of forage, for example, goats will eat some grass and sheep will eat some weeds and leafy greens, but they are specialized to eat one or the other. And they do have different mineral needs. For example, goats have a high need for copper, whereas anything over a trace amount for sheep can be actually lethal. One of the biggest differences in my mind is the personality of the two. Goats tend to be much friendlier and more social with humans. They're also more trainable, they really follow routine very well, and that can make them very easy to handle. Where sheep, on the other hand, are very skittish and have much more of a prey mentality. Even when I've raised bottle baby lambs and handled them quite a bit when they're young, they really don't want to interact with me much once they get older. Whereas even a skittish goat I could win over with just some treats. Another big difference is that in general, most goats have horns, whereas in sheep, most breeds don't have horns. And there are definitely exceptions to both rules. Now, the presence of horns on your animals offer some unique challenges. It can make them a little more dangerous. You definitely don't want an animal to use those against you. And you have to be a little more careful about fencing. For both our sheep and goats, we primarily use the electric netting fence powered by a solar energizer. And that allows us to rotationally graze in any area we need to on this property. But we do have some areas, especially our main pasture, which is fenced in welded wire or field fence. And this large square field fence can be really dangerous for goats that have horns. They can stick their head through, and then when they go to retract their head, their horns will catch like a barb. It can cause them to panic, it can cause them to actually strangle themselves. And they definitely are more likely to jump or duck under a fence than a sheep would be. Now, that's not to say that sheep won't get out of your fence too, but in my experience, they're much more docile and more likely to stay in. Now, you may have heard that goats can be naughty, and that's definitely true. Goats are naturally very curious, and they like to jump on things, including you. But this also means they can be rough on your barns and your equipment. Hi. They are much more likely to jump on their hay bale and waste all their hay or destroy the nice hay feeder that you built them. So goats tend to get bored and they're more playful. They want to jump up on stuff, and you just have to be aware of that. You have to be a little more vigilant, making sure your areas are goat safe. If you're going to have your animals around trees, goats are much more likely to strip the bark off of them than sheep. If you were thinking about raising these animals on a property that's not yours, you want to make sure that there's not something there they're going to destroy. For example, you can raise sheep on a solar panel field, and it's a great way to access free grazing. You're definitely going to want to have sheep out there because goats are much more likely to jump on the panels and damage them. Sheep are more gentle with their environment. I've even seen them used in vineyards to trim the grape leaves. Another difference can be in the maintenance of these animals. In my experience, my flock of sheep needs their hooves maintained a lot less frequently than my goats. Some of my goats need as often as a monthly trim, whereas I can get away with not trimming my sheep hooves for sometimes a year, sometimes more. Now, we raise a hair sheep on this farm, but many breeds grow wool, and that needs to be sheared every year, so that's a consideration if you're going to raise a wool breed of sheep. Both are fairly susceptible to parasites. I think goats are easier to detect when they do get sick and when they need treatment, just because of their social nature, whereas sheep are much more likely to hide the symptoms of disease until it is far more progressed. And if you're thinking about getting dairy goats, especially high-producing dairy goats, you're going to have to be much more vigilant about the health of their udder. Those goats will be producing a larger volume of milk and will have a larger udder, which is going to have more contact with the ground, versus a sheep's udder, which is quite small usually and tucked up under their body. That contact with the ground is going to make a goat more susceptible to infection through her teeth, especially if the ground is poopy or dirty. So keeping these differences in mind, your next consideration should be, why do you want these animals? What are your goals in adding these animals to your farm or homestead? The first question I would ask is, which is better suited to my land? So if you have more forest, more weeds and brush that you need to clear, then goats are definitely the better choice. If you have big open pastures or just a lawn that you're tired of mowing, then sheep are a better way to go. Now, while you can keep a small number of animals in a fixed area or a barn, it's good to remember that it is much better for their health to have them outside and moving around and eating fresh, natural forage. Maybe you simply want a pet or a companion for, say, your horse or donkey. Then I think a goat would be a much better choice just because of their social nature. And of course, the big three reasons that people would be interested in small livestock like sheep or goats is for meat, milk, or fiber. And for each of these purposes, there are really breeds in each species that would fit. But in general, you're going to have an easier time finding a nice dairy goat. There are several dairy breeds that produce a lot of milk, whereas in sheep, there are only a few, namely the East Frisian, and the volume a sheep is going to produce is never really going to compare with a high-producing goat. Although the milk does have different qualities. Sheep milk is much higher in fat. And there are certain cheeses that you make specifically with sheep's milk. When it comes to meat, I would pick whichever one that you like to eat better. Now, lamb tends to be a little bit fattier than goat, but in my opinion, goat has a richer flavor. If you're looking to sell that meat, then lamb is definitely an easier sell, but there are some markets for goat as well. It's just a matter of what is popular in your area and what sort of marketing that you want to do for those products. And then there's fiber. There are several really nice wool breeds that you could choose from, whereas in goats, it's really limited to the Angoras, and those can be difficult to find. So as you can see, the purpose for the animal is gonna really determine which one is right for you. I really enjoy raising both of these species, and I hope this video helped you if you're trying to decide which one is right for your farm or homestead. If you'd like to learn more about how we raise our sheep, you can click right here. And if you'd like to learn more about how we raise our goats, click over here. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.